You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Christopher Media, let's make some noise.
An evil force took his life. An unearthly power has brought him back. He is a phantom, a wraith, a cosmic spirit given another chance.
Are you new in town?
Yeah. Who's the kid?
I turned my back, and the next second he was there. Like magic, almost.
You ever seen one of those before? Nah, let's just add it to our collection.
There's a kid out there using his car to kill people. Not that it's such a big deal, since it seems to be your gang he's got it in for.
Hold on! Grab the shotgun, Mama Luca.
A wraith, man! A ghost! An evil spirit, and it ain't cool!
What are you doing? Packard, stop!
Get in the car!
What are you doing, man? You
Get out of my face, Burger Boy! You wind up dead like your brother!
Hey! Who is that guy?
I don't know, but whoever he was, he's weird and ticked off.
I see his eyes, Loomis!
Who are you?
Who are you?
The Wraith. If you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to fear.
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me, of course, is Mr. Rob St. Mary.
Vengeance is mine.
Also with us this week is Patrick Bromley of the F This Movie podcast.
Hey guys, thanks for having me back.
This week we are looking at The Wraith, released in 1986. The film is directed by Mike Marvin, the same man who gave us Hot Dog the movie and Hamburger the motion picture. It stars Charlie Sheen as Jake, a new face in the town of Brooks, Arizona. Jake makes his appearance around the same time as a dark-helmeted supernatural figure arrives, the mysterious Wraith of the title. This figure takes out members of Packard Walsh's gang of goofs with his badass dodge, using the seemingly indestructible car as a weapon. And just so you know, we're going to be getting into spoilers galore in this episode. If you want to watch the movie before we ruin it for you, turn us off and then turn us on, Dead Man, after you've seen the movie. We will be here. So, Patrick, as our guest, when was the first time you saw The Wraith, and what did you think?
I did not see The Wraith until, I want to say, 2010, when Lionsgate put it out on DVD, which is crazy because I know this is one of those movies that was on HBO all the time when I was growing up, and I'm actually a little bit bummed that I didn't see it as a kid on HBO because this is exactly the kind of movie that I would have watched 100 times. Having said that, I'm glad that I didn't see it during sort of these intervening years, maybe like my early 20s when I was a bit trying to refine my tastes and becoming a bit of a snob, because I think I might have dismissed this movie as kind of disposable junk. But now I've come through the other side and I'm secure in what I like, and I have a ton of fun with this movie. This movie pushes a whole lot of my buttons.
How about you, Rob?
I didn't even know it existed until I told you that we were able to line up Mike Marvin to talk for Hamburger the motion picture, and you were like, we should do The Wraith. And I was like, okay, whatever that is. And then I looked it up, and we did the interview with him, and then I finally got around to watching it. And for me, it very much is a time capsule of that era. It owes a little bit of a debt to some other well-known films and stories. But I think overall it holds up pretty well. And also that car's pretty cool. And Mike, in case you didn't know, it's not too far from where you're at there in the lovely Metro Detroit area.
No, it is definitely not. This was a very special Dodge-made car. And we'll be definitely hearing a lot more about that when we talk to Mike Marvin later on in the show. This one I was working at the Blockbuster in Oh gosh, it was called the Ann Arbor Blockbuster, but it was actually in Pittsfield. And I was working with this guy who pretty much told me, you need to watch this movie. I'd never really heard of it before. I know I'd seen the box at other video stores, but also like you, Patrick, I had missed this when it was running on HBO because I'm sure this was a staple of cable. And nope, never saw it. Never really even paid it any attention until this guy kind of plunked it down on the counter and said, you have to check this out. And I probably saw this when I was about 18, 19 years old. Thought it was very goofy fun, but there was a little bit more to it than it just being this kind of disposable film. I went back and rewatched it again a few years ago when I was doing an article all about killer car films and kind of possessed vehicles, those kind of things. And this kind of fits in a little bit with that as far as there's some supernatural elements, though the car is not being self-driven, such as the car or the hearse, or, you know, even if you want to think of the vehicle from Duel being, you know, for sure there's a person behind the wheel in that, but there's some more supernatural-ish type stuff going on with that one too. So anyway, I really enjoyed this, and yeah, when Rob brought Mike Marvin to the table, it's like, yeah, let's do The Wraith, man. This is a movie that more people need to hear about, or those people that have seen it before, maybe caught it on HBO late at night, those folks would hopefully be interested in hearing more about this kind of goofy and star-studded cast of this little, you could call it a throwaway film, but I think there's a little bit more to it. So let's get into the plot a little bit more. We start with what it reminded me a lot of Closet Cases of the Nerd Kind, these kind of animated things going around the freeways of, I guess, Arizona, and coming together in the form of this car and this mysterious, like, leather-clad figure that's hanging out by it, and that is our title, The Wraith. And then it kind of goes into some familiar territory as far as this stranger coming into town and meeting up with this group of kind of hooligans, though we do get one scene before that of seeing the hooligans in action, and these guys are all about racing for pinks, and they're not too fair about it.
No, why should they be? They're trying to get those titles for those cars, because if you lose the drag race, you lose your car and you're walking back home.
Why'd you stop me? What do you want?
Well, let's just say it's pink.
Oh, God.
Forget it, pal. No way.
I might forget it. I'm a nice guy. But them? They think the title to your car might be worth something.
They're road pirates.
That's right. Which, you know, is an old idea from, you know, the Highwaymen idea of those thieves and robbers who hang out on the pike when you're coming down in your covered wagon or whatever, and they want to get something out of you. So this whole scene to me and the drag racing stuff kind of reminded me a little bit of Rebel Without Cause or something like that. And the gang is kind of a bunch of misfits. I mean, it's kind of like the odd weirdos this side of Surf Nazis Must Die.
I'm so glad you actually brought that up, because one of the things I wanted to point out was how much the gang reminds me. They're right out of a trauma film. I mean, most of the actors pitch their performances about on the level of a trauma film with all their colored mohawks and their crazy shouting of every line. That's totally what it reminded me of.
It's such a strange gang, man. I mean, we've got Nick Cassavetes as Packard Walsh. Nick looking pretty darn handsome in this movie. A little freakish at times, I guess mostly just because he's so much taller than everybody else in the gang, like by heads often. And he looks fairly normal, you know, he wears like a kind of a cool jacket, this kind of stuff, very 80s and everything. But then you get, Skank and Gutterboy and Rughead. Those guys are totally out of a trauma film. But then you get guys who have like leather jackets on, and it's just like, what? These guys hang out together? This doesn't make any sense to me. But you know, the two guys, I think it's Augie and Minty, they're just pretty much there, you know, to be picked off fairly early in the film. But still, there's a couple times where I'm just like, why are these people hanging out together? It doesn't seem like they would really have a lot to talk about.
Well, they have a shared love of evil. So
there you go.
Shared love of evil brings people together.
And yeah, these guys, not fair. You know, it's funny that you said Rebel Without a Cause, because I had written down in my notes, there was a line in the movie where I think it's Skank, or is it Gutterboy? I sometimes get those. It's Gutterboy says, "I got the bullet!" And I was totally like, oh, that's like the killer line from Rebel Without a Cause when he comes running out after Plato's been shot and everything. And it was so emotional, James Deaning it up all over the place. And I was like, I wonder if that's a reference. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because now I'm thinking maybe it was.
Well, not only that, but, and obviously this is, almost 20 years after this movie came out, the Rughead character played by Clint Howard, for some reason reminds me of like every sort of nerdy lab assistant stereotype you've seen in film and TV. And specifically for some reason, I want to like say that he reminds me of the opening interstitials of Aqua Teen Hunger Force, the lab assistant that has to deal with the weird doctor who's always showing him his inventions.
Sheesh. You call this a vacation? No. I call it Taco Island!
I could see that. I can really see that.
I know his crazy hairstyle, I know, was modeled after Jack Nance in Eraserhead. To me, he always reminds me of Thomas Dolby.
Oh, I can totally see that.
Maybe it's the glasses.
Oh, yeah, the glasses, and I think Thomas Dolby might have a little gap between his teeth as well.
Also, Rughead blinded me with science.
She blinded me with science!
Yeah, well, he was kind of blinded by science, or maybe supernatural science at one point, when he gets to see what's inside of the Dodge Interceptor. Yes.
Yes.
Yes! So we get that opening scene where we see these guys, they're not very fair when it comes to these races. They're going to do anything that it takes to get these pink slips and everything. I guess it's a little Faster Pussycat Kill maybe going on here too, where it's trying to race these people and, we get to keep your car if that's the case. And yeah, that's when afterwards is when we get Charlie Sheen coming into the film and riding on his, like, I don't want to say motorcycle. It's kind of more like a moped. I mean, it's not very beefy. I would expect Charlie Sheen to have a beefier ride than this thing. It very felt like, hey, Sherilyn Fenn, do you want to ride on my scooter? And she's pretty much taken with him right away when she sees him and tries to get him out of the picture when Packard shows up, because Packard has this really weird relationship with her where he thinks that she's his girlfriend, but she really doesn't want to be, but he really kind of insists that she is. And so it's kind of this stalkerish, I don't know. If I were her, I would definitely have filed a PPO by this point.
It is the epitome of controlling. This whole thing, this relationship between both of them feels like a plot from a after-school special.
You think you own me, that somehow I'm your private property.
You are. Nobody loves you as much as I do. Nobody.
It's because everybody's scared of you.
If you're not going to be my girl, you're not going to be anybody's.
Oh, yeah, I can totally see that. What would the name of that special be, Rob?
If I can't have you, no one will. There you go. Something like that. Yeah, because I think he says that at one point.
One of the things that I noticed while I was watching this movie, again, the last time, and then this time I actually timed it out in a very unscientific study. Charlie Sheen's only in this movie for about 14 minutes. He really just kind of shows up here and there, and there are long stretches where he just isn't in the film at all. And, eventually we figure out that he is the Wraith, this dark helmeted guy and everything, but that's not necessarily obvious, right? Well, yeah, fuck it. Yeah, it's totally obvious that he's supposed to be the Wraith, but really it's not. It could be anybody in the suit. It could be anybody being his stuntman in a lot of these high-speed chases when he's on his moped, those kind of things. So really, it felt like Charlie showed up for a couple days. He's not in the movie nearly as much as other characters. I mean, you get characters like Nick Cassavetes, where you see him quite often, or you get Sherilyn Fenn as Carrie Johnson, or the guy who plays the burger slinger. He's in here all the time, Billy Hankins. He's all over the place, and, it's like he definitely has much more presence in the film, though I guess Charlie Sheen has more presence because he's supposed to be the Wraith.
I didn't time it out exactly either, but for sure, 7 of those 14 minutes have to be the love scene, right?
Oh, yeah.
That thing goes on for a long time.
Yeah. It goes on for a while, and then apparently some of it was cut from different releases because Sherilyn Fenn doffs her top at one point. And as a Twin Peaks fan, I was very happy to see that, and I was happy to see her in something other than Two Moon Junction, because for a while there, if you were a fan of Sherilyn Fenn, and especially her character of Audrey Horne, you didn't have a whole lot of films to choose from until Boxing Helena came out, and then after that, but before that, it was Two Moon Junction, what was that, Meridian, I think she was in.
Meridian, baby.
Yeah, so you didn't have a whole lot else going for you, so seeing this scene and seeing her in The Wraith definitely kind of filled a need.
I didn't even realize it was her because I'm so used to seeing her with dark hair.
Yeah, she's kind of got that sun-touched look going on, and she's so tan and everything, whereas when she was Audrey Horne, she was completely pale and really kind of played that up for the character and had that, dark woman kind of thing going on, or dark girl, I suppose. But she does a pretty good job in here. There's a couple times where she delivers some lines that are kind of clunky. There's one scene in particular where she and Charlie Sheen are doing this monologue, or sorry, not monologue. They're doing this scene, and just it feels like the dialogue is coming out of, I don't know, some Harlequin romance novels or something.
Try and be brave against Packard, and he might kill you.
Or he might let you go. Courage isn't easy to come by. That's how he keeps those goons with him all the time. They're just scared.
So am I.
Carrie, listen. There's going to come a time when you'll have to take a stand. When you do that, that's when you free yourself of it. No sooner.
I want to believe you. I really do.
And I was like, oh, God, this kind of hurts. So it doesn't take too long until we figure out where everybody is at when it comes to this. We have the bad guys very broadly painted, and then we have kind of the good guys here. We've got Charlie Sheen, who's hanging around. We've got this guy Billy, who works at the burger place, and his brother was killed probably about a year ago or so. They don't really make that too clear, and his brother was going out with Sherilyn Fenn. And so through a series of flashbacks, usually through Packard's eyes, we see what happened to the brother, Jamie Hankins, and get to see that he and Sherilyn Fenn were making a little whoopee, and these guys came in and pulled him off of her, and they were stabbing him and carving up his back and all this stuff. And then it pretty much, second scene we see with Charlie Sheen, we see that he has all these scars all over his back. So it's pretty quick that we make the conclusion that, maybe he and Jamie Hankins have a little bit of a connection, especially because they look so similar. We don't see the guy that plays Jamie too often, but when we do, it's like the guy has a real striking resemblance to Charlie Sheen.
It seems odd to me that, and I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, that the movie even treats it as kind of a reveal that Charlie Sheen is the Wraith, because it is so obvious throughout the movie. So why are we pretending like we shouldn't know until that final scene? It's an interesting choice.
I think they just, maybe for the people in the way back or in the balcony or something, it's like, hey guys, for sure this is what's going on, because it is not too thinly veiled of a mystery, but they do treat it like that. I have to say it's interesting because the Wraith, he goes after all the guys that are in the gang, except for Rughead. He only goes after the guys who were there when this event happened to Jamie. And when he goes after them, he basically uses their tactics against them for the most part. This whole idea of racing and, does the drag race, I think twice with these guys. And the first time, he just parks his car sideways across the freeway and lets the other guy run into him. And it's like, okay, that's an interesting way of killing these people. Just, using yourself as this almost kamikaze pilot or a roadblock and letting your car get completely destroyed and you with it. But as soon as the car is destroyed, it comes back again. And the victims, the bad guys in this case, they look completely normal. I think they're usually naked if memory serves, and their eyes look like they've been kind of plucked out of their head or burned out of their head. So, again, very supernatural, very early in the film. And then we have the character of Sheriff Loomis coming in, who's played by Randy Quaid, and he's investigating this case, though maybe he's not the best investigator in the world.
No, he's like one step up from his character in Christmas Vacation. I mean, he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer.
No, he looks at the evidence, kind of knows that something weird's going on, but it's almost like it kind of feels a little Ed Wood-esque. Like I expect him to scratch his head with his gun, like, that's a dead body, all right.
Again, I feel like there's more time devoted to him removing the pickles from his burger than there is to him solving the case. And maybe this is a callback to this director's previous work. I couldn't say for sure, but there's a lot of time spent with him in that burger that he never gets to eat.
Yeah, I really wish that this had taken place at a Buster Burger drive-in instead of this drive-in that they have throughout the film.
Well, that was the thing I was thinking is there's all of the hamburger stuff that he shot in the film just before this one, I'm sure came in handy when shooting the little hamburger stand. And then also, if you notice, the hot dog is on special at the hamburger stand. Yeah.
Very nice. You think that was a callback?
Can I, Buster, help you?
One thing that was a weird callback and kind of stuck out like a sore thumb to me was using the line,
I don't know what the hell's in there, but it's weird and pissed off, whatever it is.
From The Thing inside of this one. When Gutterboy said that,
I don't know. But whoever he was, he's weird and pissed off.
Whoa, what is going on? I guess Gutterboy, maybe he's, the cinephile of the group and is peppering his language with callbacks to other films. Did anyone else notice that?
I haven't seen The Thing in so long, I can't remember.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think I caught the reference either. But again, had I seen this as a kid, I could not have appreciated how much of this movie draws from other movies. It's become very sort of fashionable now to do that, to sort of mix up all these other films that you've seen into one genre movie. And this movie does it, I think, way ahead of its time, but I did not catch the reference to The Thing.
Sometimes it feels like Skank and Gutterboy are just kind of in their own movie. There's one point where they are going after Charlie Sheen and Sherilyn Fenn, and it is just this exercise in comedy as they're going along. And poor Gutterboy is just, he's on fire. I mean, both of these guys are just playing it to the hilt, and I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy watching them so much. I mean, you expect Clint Howard to be, going insane, especially after seeing movies like Ice Cream Man and, Carnosaur and these kind of things. You would want a broader Clint Howard performance, but he's actually kind of restrained in this, apart from the hair and the glasses and everything. But he's relatively a normal guy, especially compared to Skank and Gutterboy.
They are the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of the Wraith.
Very nice. Very nice.
Well, one thing I was kind of amazed by, and I know this was made in 1985-86, is the fact that this soundtrack has so many relatively big-name groups and artists that if you tried to do this today, it would probably cost the whole budget of this film in order to get all that music.
I was also very pleasantly surprised that all of those music rights were retained for the DVD release, because I could easily see this being a movie where all of a sudden there are approximations of a lot of these songs. But yeah, I had the same reaction as I revisited it. Every few minutes, a really big hit would come on, and that too kind of adds to the time capsule charm of the movie.
And even hits that were just recent when the film came out. I mean, you have what is it? The Robert Palmer tunes in there, which I think was top in the charts in 85, 86. And then there's an Ozzy track in there, which to me sounds like may have been written for the film, because I don't necessarily remember that one unless it's off one of the mid-80s albums that I can't quite remember. But it's pretty amazing, like, in terms of what they were able to do with this film. Not only that, but I mean, like, the stunts in relation to the cars and everything. I mean, this is all decade before digital, so it's all practical. It's all, they used actual cars and actual crashes and explosions and everything, and it works really well.
Yeah, I was really impressed by the car hauler that they have at one point, where it's just losing cars left and right on the freeway. And we've got a chase going on. We've got the car hauler going on. We've got at least 3 cop cars. And yeah, it was all really well filmed and really well choreographed. And unfortunately, there was a death that was involved in the making of this film, automotive related. But the stunts and everything really help this film, and yeah, just the car mayhem, the vehicular manslaughter that's happening in here. I mean, we've got the Wraith doing this thing a couple times where he's just, putting himself in the path of these other vehicles. And then there's one point where he just, when poor Skank and Gutterboy get it, he just uses his car like a missile, basically, and shoots himself into this warehouse where there was a lot of acetylene and all this stuff going on before, and Packard warns them, like, don't fire that gun, but nothing ever kind of comes of it. But apparently all the acetylene was still there later on when he just shoots this car right into the warehouse and blows it to Kingdom Come. And fortunately, Rughead is spared from that.
We should talk about that car a little bit. I did a little research on it, and it was a car that Dodge created in the early 80s, and it was only used for promotional things and as a pace car, like at the Indy 500 and things like that. And they only made like 6 of them. And they used 2 of them in this film. And one of them, I don't know if it's from this film or one of the 6 that they created, is actually on display at the Walter P. Chrysler Museum in Auburn Hills, so just north of Detroit. So if you're interested in the Wraith and you want to see the actual Wraith car, one of them at least, go check out the Chrysler Museum.
You kind of sound like you're from Barcelona and saying race car when you say that.
Race car.
The Wraith car.
Check out the Wraith car. It's fabulous. Thank you.
And of course, there's another Detroit connection going on with this film, which is Sherilyn Fenn herself, who was from the area. And a lot of people may not know that she is related to another famous Detroiter, Suzi Quatro, the punk rocker who made her appearance on Happy Days quite a few times as Leather Tuscadero.
Yeah, I know you're a big Happy Days fan, but she was also part of, in the late 60s, early 70s, I believe, with her sisters called the Pleasure Seekers, which were a Detroit band. And I hate to say it, but musically, Suzi Quatro seems to get more respect over in UK and in France than she does in her own hometown. Not a lot of folks are big Suzi Quatro fans in Detroit for some reason.
But yet, Bob Seger still gets tons of airplay.
Like a rock. That's all I got to say.
Maybe she should have recorded a few tunes that could have been used by Chrysler or Ford or somebody.
You do what you can.
Yeah. So the movie goes along at a pretty normal pace. I mean, it's just pretty much the Wraith picking off these guys in interesting ways. We're getting these flashbacks throughout the film. We have this conflict going on between Packard and Sherilyn Fenn. Does anybody else think that Packard Walsh, that maybe his first name was a nod to the Packard company?
Absolutely.
All right, good.
And speaking of Packard, if you still want to visit the old Packard plant, it's still standing in Detroit. It's been there almost 60 years, abandoned, and it's one of the biggest industrial ruins, I think, in the world. So enjoy and try and make sure that you have your tetanus up to date before you go there.
Yeah, that is a prime location for ruin porn, as they say. If you want to go see some interesting decay, that is one of the places that you have to check out. That, and I think like the old train station, and there's a couple other places on the must-see list for seeing what Detroit used to be at one point. Like I said, the film goes along at this pace. We know pretty much, I mean, I think I knew the first time out what was going to happen in this film as soon as it started going, but yet It's enjoyable. Like I said, it's by the numbers, but I like those numbers. I like the car chases. I like the interactions of the characters. I almost like that I don't get a whole lot of Charlie Sheen. I kept thinking of him in other films while I was watching it this last time. I kept thinking of him in Hot Shots and things. And I like Hot Shots a lot, but, it's almost to the point where he's kind of become the joke rather than being able to be the perform the jokes. So it's interesting that this movie has two stars in it that have basically become unhinged, or as we're going to hear Clint Howard say in a few minutes, Randy Quaid has gone off the reservation. So we don't get a whole lot of scenes of those two guys together, but when you look at them, it's like, oh yeah, both of these guys go crazy in their own way in just a couple decades.
Well, let's talk about that ending and the reveal. There's something about it that kind of troubles me a little bit. And what bothers me with the ending is, okay, after all the gangs killed off, and I think it's Randy Quaid's character goes, well, that's it. He's got his revenge and we won't see any more problems. The car pulls up in front of Sherilyn Fenn's character's house. He gets out, he takes the mask off, the helmet off, and it's Charlie Sheen. And we get the feeling that they're going to be together. But the thing is that, is he him? Is he is his soul taking over the body of Charlie Sheen? Has he morphed from some sort of supernatural character into actual being a human? I'm kind of the ending left me with a lot of questions in terms of, how do you go from being this sort of vengeful spirit to, being flesh again, I guess, is for lack of a better way to say it.
I also, when he does pull off the mask, he says something like, oh, I can't do that again. And it's kind of a jokey moment. And the way that their last scene together plays out has always bothered me. It feels so out of step with the rest of the movie in terms of its tone and the way that they kind of talk to each other. It's very, very on the nose. And it almost feels like, not a rewrite, but that it's a kind of a forced happy ending. I mean, the logical ending to the movie is, okay, my work here is done, and now I'm going to disappear, vanish. I did what I came here to do. But yeah, like you said, he's just going to live his life now as Chuck Sheen and drive off into the sunset with Sherilyn Fenn. That last scene, to me, always feels a little bit at odds with the rest of the movie.
Yeah, because Billy really is the guy who's been taking care of her, watching out for her. You can tell that he's carrying a torch for her, which is kind of weird because she was his brother's girl, and it feels like more of a crush situation than a caregiver kind of situation to me. So yeah, it's a little weird in that way. And yeah, I was very surprised seeing again that she gets on that motorcycle and goes off with him, and it was just like, wait, no, you should be leaving him. You should be leaving her by the curb, and she should go on with her own life because, yeah, he should just disappear into the ether because that's where he came from and that's where he should go back to. Because there are several scenes where he's just driving along and poof, he turns into fireworks and goes off into the distance, or kind of, Close Encounters of the Third Kinds it off into the Arizona sky. And it's like, what? Are they going to turn into stars together, or what kind of malarkey is this? I don't know. The other thing that confused me was this whole idea of the kind of braces that are on the Wraith character, and when he kills these guys, each time he kills one of them, or at least you see it very clearly the first time, and then you kind of see it a little bit as you go along, these braces that he has on himself that disappear once he kills one of the guys. And it's like, I'm not really sure what that's supposed to signify either. I mean, it's not like, Forrest Gump running and the braces flying off of him or something. It's just like, I don't really get the idea that he is, in chains or something. And each time, one of the guys dies, he becomes a little bit more free, unless maybe that's supposed to say, I am becoming more human again as I kill these people.
Yeah, that would be my guess, maybe just based on what we were just talking about, and maybe it's an idea that kind of hit the cutting room floor or just was never fully fleshed out. But yeah, maybe each time a brace is removed, he becomes one step closer to starring on 2.5 Men.
Poor guy.
Well, he would eventually go on to Platoon right after this. As a matter of fact, Mike Marvin tells an interesting story on how he may have been the deciding vote on that possibility.
All right, we're going to take a break and play an interview with two of the Wraith's baddies, Rughead and Gutterboy, a.k.a. Clint Howard and James Bozian. I guess there's a little bit of a similarity between Rock and Roll High School and The Wraith. Is just that both films have such a strong cast, and to see, Charlie Sheen and Nick Cassavetes, Sherilyn Fenn, Randy Quaid, just so many great actors all in one film. What was that experience like for you working on The Wraith?
I had a wonderful time. We shot in Tucson, Arizona in the fall, and the weather was great. And when they went out and did all that driving stuff, they could really go and get really good vistas. And, whenever I see a piece of that movie, and, especially the driving stuff, it's great. I admire quite a bit of that movie. Some of that movie sort of, doesn't ring true to me. But generally speaking, I thought it was great. But working on it, the camaraderie that we developed, David Sherrill and Jamie Bozian and I and Nick, and Charlie. Charlie is a wonderful fellow. I got to know him, and I actually did a couple of short films that he directed soon after The Wraith. And so, we spent some time hanging out together when I was in my, mid-20s and he was in his early 20s. And that all came from The Wraith. The Wraith is one of those movies. Apollo 13 and The Wraith are the two films that I have maintained relationships with the people I've worked with. Yeah, David Sherrill and Jamie Bozian, I called them New Year's Eve. It's one of those things. They're just old friends that have stuck. I thought they were both great as Skank and Gutterboy. And I always wanted to work with Randy. Randy was an idol of mine. In fact, here's an anecdotal piece of trivia. We auditioned for the same role in The Last Picture Show, that he ended up getting the part. He was a little older and a little bigger than me, but I was right in the thick of it. I actually went back to the semifinals or the finals of the audition, and Randy ended up getting the part. But it didn't really bother me. He did such a great job in that movie. He didn't say anything. He was just sweeping. But he just had a great look, and he was great in The Last Detail. Very organic in everything he's done. He was one of those guys. There were actually three actually, that in my life that I would like to work with professionally, and Randy Quaid was one of them. This is before he jumped the reservation, of course. And David Bowie, who I haven't had the chance to work with, was the other. And I'm brain locking right now, but Jack Nicholson. My dad has gotten to work with Jack a few times, but I don't believe I'll ever have the chance. I got to work with De Niro.
Well, what did you work on with De Niro? I'm trying to remember.
We worked on Backdraft.
That's right.
Yeah, and it was quite an experience. He's better than you think he is. It's like as good as... the experience as a young actor was really, really great because, his process ends up putting him in a position where he is just creating gold. And, when he's like, the one thing I was told by Ron, well, first of all, everybody was a little nervous because, Bob was, getting Bob De Niro to be in Backdraft was a big deal. And so getting Donald Sutherland to be in Backdraft was a big deal. But okay, Bob, and I didn't audition for Backdraft. Ron just gave me the role. And his partner, Brian Grazer, after Ron had given me the part of playing the autopsy technician with that scene, Brian was kind of nervous, and he said, maybe we should audition some people. And Ron said, no, I think Clint will be okay. And then once Brian saw the dailies, he went to Ron and he said, Clint never has to audition again. So I guess I held my own. But I was warned that Bob likes to do a lot of takes, and he does. And at first, it's not that he's not prepared, it's just that he's warming up. And yet, by the 7th or 8th take, what's coming out of the scene is just absolute, we are, I don't want to get too weird about it, but it's almost like, we were mining nuggets. We were finding little surprises inside the scene. And I was, aware of what he was doing, and I was following along, and he appreciated that. And, we ended up having a great scene together. And it was, a wonderful memory for me.
Well, I figure the better the actor that you're in a scene with, the better you're going to be because you get to feed off of their energy and they feed off of you.
Well, yes, of course. It's a lot like golfing. If you play with a good foursome and they're really serious about it, you're going to probably play better than if you play with your, fat Uncle Charlie, who hits it like an 80-year-old woman in leg chains. But getting back to the Wraith, it was a limited budget, but it was not a low-budget movie. It was just limited. So, we knew we were moving fast, and the accommodations were all pretty dubious, it wasn't, they didn't treat us like stars. In fact, I think they were a little paranoid that we were going to somehow not be professional because of our age. And we were a herd. We were a herd of young 20-something, guys with, per diem in their pocket living in Tucson. Griffin O'Neill was in it. Chris Nash was in it. Sherilyn Fenn, of course, huge role. And at the time, she was dating Johnny Depp. And Johnny came to Tucson and, hung out for a few weekends while we were there, which was kind of a trip. The first time I met Johnny was there.
Is that how the RPG movies kind of got made?
Yes. Well, after Charlie came back from Platoon, because Johnny had worked on Platoon he had done small little tiny role in Platoon, and Charlie was over there, and Charlie had finally made enough money to where spending $20,000 or $30,000 making a short film wasn't didn't scare him. And in fact, he had signed a deal with some studio to a 3-movie deal. Now the money's a joke, but at the time it was pointing him in the right direction. So he self-invested money, and he had met and become friends with Johnny, and so Johnny and I starred in RPG. And, there were 2 RPGs made, and the first time it was starring Clint Howard and Johnny Depp. And then before we could do the second one, Johnny had become a star of that TV show, the one they shot up in Canada. 21 Jump Street. And in fact, Charlie had to privately fly Johnny down from Vancouver. And Johnny only worked on RPG 2 a couple of days because he had to fly up and work on Jump Street. But our credits got switched. He lapped me. Johnny Depp lapped me. It went from being starring Clint Howard and Johnny Depp to starring Johnny Depp and Clint Howard. Oh, well, not a bad guy to get lapped by.
No. And from what I hear, he's still working. So
yes, I think he does a movie or 2 from time to time. He's got some property, he travels around. And I think probably the first question I would ask Johnny is, hey, Johnny, do you know how many shitters you own?
Do you have that number handy for you?
Oh, yeah, I could tell you. Listen, I only own one home. It's a 3-bedroom, it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house. I've got 3 commodes. But I know, when people start to buy places and start to buy big places, I don't believe my brother ever knew exactly how many commodes he had in his property.
When it comes to the Wraith, I hear that there was some tension between the producers and what was going on with everybody else. Is that true?
Well, yeah. This fellow John Kemeny, his underwear was too tight. And I don't know, somebody had drawn up some press clippings about John Kemeny that he read. And, he seemed like a nice enough fellow. And, hey, somebody's got to hold the brain. Somebody's got to be kind of the authority figure. And he was almost kind of like the stern principal of the school. And, he had some lame rules. And, but you know what? He got the movie made. I don't think I sent him a Christmas card the following year, but he got the movie made. He did what he thought he had to do. But yeah, there was some tension. But listen, he was dealing with a cast of young, toxic Peter Pans. We didn't exactly finish work and, run over to the YMCA and work out for an hour and then go to church and then go to bed. That just wasn't really in our, itinerary. But it all got done. When you do something like manufacture a movie, there's bound to be friction in certain places. And some of it may be founded and some of it may be unfounded. And I don't know what would have happened if the producer would have been a hippie, And Mike Marvin was a young guy, he had written a pretty good script. He was a good writer. Mike, I'll tell you what, I've read a couple of scripts that Mike had written, and they were very simple, and he had kind of an attitude about his writing, but you know what? He was a pretty good writer. I like Mike as a person, but he didn't quite have enough authority to sort of override the producer. And so he was kind of stuck in the middle, dealing with a young cast, and he was trying to keep everybody happy. And, listen, there was a limited amount of money. This wasn't Heaven's Gate. We were going to be in Tucson for 4 or 5 weeks. I mean, that was going to be it. I could understand the producer's neuroses about it all and keeping us on a short leash.
No, I imagine with all of those young men in one place, it probably was not very easy.
It seemed easy to me. I mean, listen, I was experienced at the time. I mean, for me, I was a veteran. I'd been working for over 20 years. But, and I thought all these guys were, they were all pros. There was nobody sucking the oxygen out of a room. Charlie was happy-go-lucky, and he was good, and he was a very giving guy and a part of the team. Everybody was part of the team. The only person who wasn't part of the team was the producer. But if that's how he feels like he needs to position himself, oh well, it ain't my money. I doubt if it was his money either, but he represented it. It was his job. He was the steward. I think they all wished it was a little better than it was, but you know what? It holds up pretty well. It's an interesting movie, and it's got a lot of fans.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, when it comes to people recognizing you on the street, what do they typically recognize you for? It's
a variety. It's hardly ever Rughead because I'm bald. I get Seinfeld a lot, of course. I get Star Trek, and I get, of course, Ron Howard's brother. Just they know me as Ron Howard's brother, or the Water Boy, Sandler's movies, Little Nicky. And of course, listen, my wonderful fortune about, what's happened to me, it's a wide array of things. I mean, I'll get people like on Facebook, they'll see the episode I did of Odd Couple, which will remind them, oh yeah, it was an Odd Couple. Gentle Ben, there are the grandmothers that remember Gentle Ben. I mean, there's people, anybody, you got to be over 40 to know what Gentle Ben is.
I was so happy to see you show up on that Shatner roast.
Oh yeah, well, listen, the guy who directed, and I'll think of his name in just a second, Rats, and I'm embarrassed because it's not coming right to my head. Very famous sort of television event director. He was the one that called and asked me, and I had worked with him once before on another project, and also, too, he was the one that directed the MTV Movie Awards the year that I got the Lifetime Achievement Award. And he was so impressed with my attitude, and he told me, my wife and I got to go to the Super Bowl one year in New Orleans. I had done some sort of work for the NFL, and they said, hey, you want the opportunity to they didn't send a private jet for me, but I had a couple of tickets waiting for me to go to the Super Bowl, so we decided to go. Oh, Joel Gallen is his name, and his job at that time was to direct the halftime show of the Super Bowl, and we were at one of those Super Bowl parties, and he came up to me and he said, hey, I'm Joel. I go, oh, hi, Joel, how you doing? Yeah, nice to see you again. And he said, listen, I just want to tell you, that segment, that the Lifetime Achievement Award segment, was probably the best piece of television I ever put together. And it made me feel pretty proud. But he was the one that did the roast. And because I normally, listen, if it wouldn't have been somebody like that, I probably would have looked at my appointment book, and no matter what the page looked like, I would have said, oh, I'm busy that day. Also, as it turns out, I believe Ben Stiller may have jogged their imagination, and he's a huge Star Trek fan, and he had done something for that roast, and he had actually brought my name up to the people who were doing the roast, to Joel, and then because a few months later he hired me for Night at the Museum too. I mean, being a Star Trek geek, I have a quick Star Trek story. This is years and years ago, and I was a young man. But, I did Star Trek when I was, 6 years old. And I had an appointment, basically a meeting, an audition, It was a general audition with George Lucas for a project he was doing, and I believe it was Star Wars. They were seeing everybody in town, and I was of age and on the list, and I certainly wasn't right for the part or anything. But anyway, I got called in, and I walk into this big room, and Francis Coppola is sitting in a big leather chair, and there's another fellow, Fred Roos, who is sitting there, who's a producing partner of them, and then the chair was turned, this big leather chair was turned around, and George Lucas slowly swivels around in this big leather chair, and then you realize it's George Lucas, because he's not a very big guy. I mean, the leather chair completely swallowed him up. So he spun around, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Commander Baylock, Corbinite maneuver." And in my mind, I'm saying to myself, "Geez, George, get a life." So anyway, but yeah, hey, you know what? If I tried to guide my career or tried to, whatever, I would have just mucked it up. I'm sort of a go with the flow guy, and I hopefully realize that when opportunity arises, I don't muck it up.
What are you working on coming up that you're excited about?
I don't really have anything. There is a little independent movie project that I basically co-wrote along with a fellow who is no longer with us, and I have been sort of working on it, doing drafts, assembling, trying to get investors. It's an interesting little project. It would be, a lot of people would call it a pure vanity project. I just think it's a great little story. It's a little horror movie. It's sort of a psychological horror movie, kind of like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, but more modern and more horror. Anyway, we're pretty close to making it last fall. On a very limited budget, we hadn't quite figured out exactly how we were going to spend the money and do it for, and get what we wanted. The script had a few demands in terms of production value, and it was, I was determined, I still am determined, that we get those production values. And then also, too, this past fall I had my right hip replaced, and this late summer, as we were into early pre-production, my right hip began to really kill me. And in consultation with my brother, who, is certainly a part of this in spirit and would love to see me direct a movie, not that I have any sort of burning desire to try to chase him. It's just, it'd be something to do. And he likes the story. But he said to me, he goes, "Listen, if your hip is bothering you and you can't sleep or anything, you're just beginning pre-production. You don't want to do that to yourself. It's torture." So anyway, I parked it, and maybe this spring and this summer I will come back and revisit it, which is going to mean fundraising. And, listen, making a movie is not sexy. I mean, and another thing about making a movie is if I independently can get some financing and get $1 million raised, my goodness, my main job is to be like that fellow on the Wraith. My main job is to be the guardian and the custodian of that investment money. As the director and the actor, that's all fine and good, and I can flex my muscles that direction. But my foremost responsibility is to my investors, and making sure that, as a filmmaker, I take every nickel and put it on the screen.
Well, hey, this has been wonderful. I don't want to take up more of your time. You've been so generous to me already. I really
thank you. Listen,
this.
I'd like I told you before. I got my mom's side of the family, the Spiegels. They had a gift of gab. And my goodness, I had relatives that could talk me under the table. But talking is not a problem of mine, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to reflect back on these movies and have a conversation about it, and, no problem.
Well, hey, when I put up on our Facebook that we're going to be talking to you, I had so many people say, "Are you doing Evil Speak?"
Well, maybe some other time.
I was going to say maybe in 2016, if you're up for it.
Yeah,
Let's do
listen,
an Evil Speak.
Maybe I'll circle back. Maybe if I get this little independent thing off the ground, I might end up, stepping on your back and saying, "Hey, give me some help. Give me some PR."
Mr. Howard, if there's anything I can do to ever help you, you just let me know. How did you get into the business?
Oh, God. I guess I was like I did plays in high school and just got into it that way. I was always doing plays, and then towards the end of my senior year, I actually was able to get some like professional type work. So I was juggling all those. I just always wanted to be an actor. I guess I wanted to be a golfer too, but then I really wanted to be an actor. I started playing in golf tournaments and realized that the guys like 20 pounds lighter than me and smaller than me were hitting the ball 50 yards further. But then I was always acting into the theater, really, and I studied at Cal Arts, California Institute of the Arts, and just kind of took it from there. I've been pretty blessed.
How did you kind of make that transition from student to professional jobs? Well,
when I was at Cal Arts, I started going on auditions. That's one of the reasons why I kind of parted ways from Cal Arts. Got kicked out, actually. Yeah, so I was always trying to break in. Even when it was a pretty rigorous training program. At the same time, I was trying to foster relationships in L.A. Do that kind of thing. And I remember one summer at our school, Clint Eastwood was there filming Firefox. They did a couple of, it's like an old movie, Firefox, where it involves like the jet fighter that you're able to steer with your mind or something like that. It was an old Clint Eastwood movie.
Oh yeah, I saw it at the drive-in.
Right. There were scenes that they were filming from that movie at Cal Arts because it was kind of empty during the summer, and I was living in the dorms there. I remember Clint Eastwood. I was able to just stand there and watch him. I remember watching Clint Eastwood direct. And, I wish it was such a better story because I really was there. When they were filming there, they were there for several days, and I was there for like 3 days. It's not like some Maximum story where like I hung out. Clint Eastwood took me under his wing. I wish it was some amazing story like that. But I just remember being there and watching Clint Eastwood, and I was like, man, I really want to do this. So I have my main background's in theater, but I always wanted to be in film. And I just wanted to, and then I was able to do it, and then not do it, and then do it, and now I'm involved in development and storytelling, and of course I want to be an actor, but I want to be an actor towards creating stuff. Not on my own, but just collaborating with other people and getting projects done. Just in answer to your question, overall, it was really just what I always wanted to do.
Now, I know you'd been in stuff before the Wraith, like an after-school special, a couple other things. How was that kind of transition to being in this film, which was a fairly big deal at the time when it came out?
Yeah, I had done a few things, but The Wraith was my first feature film, the first movie I ever did. It was such a huge deal for me. I mean, it was amazing. It was my, and really it was my best ever professional experience. A lot of actors, they have life-changing experiences working on the film, tattoos, friends for life, that kind of thing. Everybody has theirs. Well, The Wraith was mine.
You shared a lot of scenes with David Shirell. What was he like working with?
He was pretty amazing. Dave and I just really, we connected, acting-wise from the start in terms of acting together. We're really, really super different as people, but we just connected artistically. Dave and I were actually the first two that were cast in the movie. I mean, of course, we were just supporting players, and they were looking for big names and all that kind of stuff. But Dave Shirell and I, to the best of my knowledge, I don't know if Mike Marvin, he probably didn't venture into the weeds that much, but I think Dave and I were the first two people that were cast in the movie.
The scenes that you have together, it's almost a different movie from the rest of the film, and that's the movie I want to watch. Like, especially when you guys are pursuing Charlie Sheen, that is one of my favorite scenes.
Well, that scene, it's funny because Mike, the genius of, the amazing thing about Mike Marvin is the amount of freedom that, he gave at the time and still gives, because I've collaborated with him, other times subsequent to that, and he's just so amazing. That's the the best thing about all these guys that we worked with on this movie, and we've all stayed in contact, Mike on down, Charlie and Nick and all that, is that they're unbelievable collaborators. All these guys, I like them more as artistic collaborators than I do as people. I've worked with all of them subsequently on, various projects, scripts, readings, music, the whole 9 yards. All those guys are very well read and opinionated people. and they're better as collaborators than they are as people. You can put that in print. I love those guys. The scene where we're chasing Charlie. Well, there were only a few lines in that were actually in the script. And I remember, Mike says that, Mike, I think in interviews has said that, everything was, I don't know if he said that everything was scripted, but really that scene was really generated on the spot. Dave and I were really locked in on the characters and everything was going so well. It was so exciting. I remember when we were about to film those main things, the main chase scene, Mike, Lee, and Dave and I had been working on it, developing it, saying a couple of things I want to say. The night that we filmed that was the anniversary of James Dean's death. So that's when I say the line, "I got the bullets," that's our James Dean tribute. Mike just kind of leaned in the car and says, "All right, you guys, what do you got?" And we sort of told him what we want to do, and he just kind of said, "Let's do it." He was really open always. We did a lot of rewriting and collaborating on the spot just based on what was happening and what had been developed. But that scene, that's a pretty fun, that's a funny scene. That kind of holds up. That movie was so dopey. Like, the more you get away, the older that movie gets, the better it gets for whatever reason.
The energy that you bring to that role, I mean, both you and David, you're just so tweaked out during that, and it just is amazing that you can maintain that level of energy through that entire performance. Yeah, my jaw kind of got pretty jacked up working on that, and my teeth kind of got jacked up from all that crap I was putting in there. But it was really fun. I mean, that character, when I was going to go in for the audition, I was just kind of like washing up in the morning, and it was just only a few lines in the part of the script, the side that they give you. And I remember just looking in the mirror, I was like, what can I do with this line? And I kind of jacked my jaw over, and I said, wow, everything. And I said a few of the lines, and I was like, every time, that sounds really funny. Like, everything. And I just kept talking that way until I got it to where I could talk like that nonstop. And then I went in. That's how I did when I went into the audition. That level of collaboration that you had with your co-stars and that level of freedom that Mike Marvin gave you when it came to being able to come up with the scene on your own, have you had that in subsequent films that you've worked on? You try and jam it in on various other things that you work with, that you work with. It just all depends on what's going on when you're filming it and where the project's at. The answer is no. I've never had that freedom and that level of exhilaration artistically on any project I've ever done since. I caught the James Dean line, and I'm so happy now that was there, because I was like, is that what was he recalling Rebel Without a Cause? There was a line in there too, and I can't remember if it's you or David that said that whatever it is, it's weird and pissed off. It's weird and pissed off. Yes, because that was, Dave is a sci-fi monster, and it was actually Dave Sherrill, I think, came up with the idea for I Got the Bullets, or I don't know, it might have been me. My remembering is that Dave came up with that, but Dave was constantly doing that. It gets back to collaboration. You're constantly, when everybody's on board and doing the same thing. I mean, I'm making this freaking movie sound like Gone with the Wind. I'm just speaking from my personal experience. We all know it's a cartoon, and it is what it is, and but it does get better with age. When everybody is on board in that moment, you're just throwing things in there. And Dave is, he's a big, and he knows everything about everything that's going on all the time, and still does to this day. So he has a movie guy. We're always trying to put movie stuff in there. That was always welcome. Mike, it's like anything that worked. It was a kind of set where people were not speaking out of tune. Whenever somebody was saying something, the timing was right. It seemed like to me, just seemed like everything, in that particular thing, everything just came together. Everybody collaborated and threw stuff in. Now, you and Nick would work again together on Attack of the Killer Bimbos, right? Yes. Nick is really unbelievable to work with as an actor. It's, that's mainly how I think of him, because that's how I got to know him. And as a director, there's nobody on earth who's, better with actors. So, Nick is, I've worked with Nick on quite a few projects. He's pretty up there.
and that's his main thing. Because he's an actor, he's so great, working with actors. So.
And you and Mike Marvin would work again on Wishman?
Yes, we did Wishman, and Mike and I have done script stuff together. I've done, he's always getting writing jobs, and he sends things my way, and I collaborate with him, and I read scripts for him, and give him notes on things. And, I've got a couple scripts that he has that he's pushing that I've, worked with him on.
That's great. It seems like this initial experience really helped lead to a lot of other things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure, definitely. Pretty much all those guys. They're all pretty special people to me.
Do you get recognized on the street as Gutterboy ever?
Yes, it happens. It does happen. I live in North Carolina now, so every now it doesn't happen that much. But when I was living in LA, it probably happened, once a month or something. But what the thing is on Facebook, you get, with Facebook now, people can just reach out to you. So I've always over the years gotten people, just sending you messages. And a lot of times in different languages, but they're real casual about it. Like, here, I'm just casually writing to you in Chinese, I'm casually writing you in Romania, Finland, Iceland, and or people from different countries think I love Wraith. They're broken English, whatever. People have always been just the movie stands up. It's like epic silliness, and it just gets cooler, I think. And a lot of people have grown up watching that movie just over and over and over again. And after, I think when it first came out on HBO, they pretty much ran that thing, 50 times a day for years. Of course, we've not been compensated accordingly, but that movie's it's run a lot.
What are you working on now?
I have a couple scripts I'd like to shoot right now, but I'm working on all different kinds of things. Scripts are always coming my way. I'm always working on stuff. I'm personally adapting a book right now into a screenplay. I'm looking at a jackass who, wants to tell a story, who's got their script and their dream. And who we did not talk about, which I do want to throw in, is our Mr. Clint Howard. There's no one on earth that is like Clint Howard. A dude is a living legend who's been a crotchety old man who was 25 years old. I'm not sure if you picked up on that. There is no one. Whenever you're with Clint, you feel extremely lucky. He's very unimpressed with himself and has no idea that people want to hang out with him. One of the best experiences you could ever have is to walk through an airport with Clint Howard. Oh my God, I've done it a few times.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God. It's like the cross-section of people who come up to him or react to him is insane. They're like old folks, young folks, every incarnation of film geeks. It's hilarious. And he's a walking, he's pretty much a walking encyclopedia of Hollywood and life stories. He knows everyone. He's worked with all of them. Probably gets about 8 residual checks a day. And my last thing is it's so funny. People always want to ask me about Charlie. First of all, if people ask me about it, I will, give a very tidy opinion. Most of the time, I don't even mention it because a lot of people have a lot of problems with him. But I feel about him like all the other people that I worked with on that movie. I did a couple movies with him. We worked at the same production company that he had with Dave Sherrill and Nick. Got a couple movies. He's just a great guy. And it's funny. Here's the point I want to make about Charlie is, 2.5 Men, obviously it stands as, it's pretty much a lesson in terrific comedic writing, and Charlie was great in the role. But the show never really flipped my lid because Charlie is much funnier in real life than he was on that show. He's hilarious. He's pretty much a comedy magnet.
When it's the guy in the suit in the Wraith, is that Charlie or is that somebody else?
I think they had a body double. Charlie was in it a couple times. He was not in that suit that much. He really wasn't. Yeah, I don't remember him being in the suit that much, but Charlie was always around. I think he flew out a few times and a couple times when we were doing that thing, but he was always around. But yeah, I guess he wasn't in the tremendous amount of those scenes.
Yeah, his career at that time was just insane. It just would blow up
that
from there.
Yeah. He pretty much, and I get the funniest thing. I don't know. Have you heard the Johnny Depp stories?
I've only heard very brief things from Clint when he was talking about Johnny Depp showing up one day on set.
Well, here's the thing, and then I'll get off the phone. I just wanted to make sure that someone asked me about the Wraith, I could just get out a few of these things in there. The funny thing about Johnny Depp was, first of all, Johnny is a really prince of a guy personally. He's a really nice guy. I have not been around him in several years, but I just know he's a really good guy. He's uber friendly, the whole nine yards. But at the time, he was nobody. He was Sherilyn's boyfriend, and that was it. He was just there visiting her on the set. I believe he maybe had done Nightmare on Elm Street, but this guy was not a big star. He was like Sherilyn Fenn's boyfriend. But the funny thing was, I remember I was walking with him, and, I was walking with him and Cheryl, and we were walking to, I believe, go to the set. And I remember walking next to the guy and just looking over him and going, this freaking guy is cool. He had just the perfect, rings and necklaces, and, his jeans were just so, and he had, this jean jacket on. And I was like, this is a good-looking dude. So he really had something back then. But he was nobody at the time. He was Sherilyn's boyfriend.
Thanks to Mr. Howard and Mr. Bozian for taking the time to talk to us. You can hear more of our interview with Clint Howard on our upcoming Rock and Roll High School episode, which we are fairly certain is going to be quite epic, and that's coming this summer. So, gents, I think we talked a little bit about this, but do you still think that the film holds up? And do you think that it would be something you'd recommend to others?
I would have no problems recommending this film to other folks, though I would definitely predicate it on the idea that it's very much a time capsule.
I think at the time the movie was kind of lumped in with the teen movie genre, almost as though The Lost Boys did teenage vampires and Teen Wolf or whatever did teenage werewolves, and this was like the teen ghost movie. But it's definitely not. And I think in a lot of ways, as much as it is such a time capsule in terms of its style and the clothes and the sensibility of it and the music and all that, in some ways I do feel like it's almost ahead of its time, just in the way that it really is pulling all of these old kind of genre and exploitation movies and kind of mixing them together into one movie. I mean, it's a real drive-in movie, and there weren't a ton of those made, I think, at this level. Not that this is a huge budget movie, but it did have some stars in it during the 80s. And I think if you are into those kinds of movies, I think this is actually a really good one.
And we'll get more into that in a bit in terms of all of the particulars that we see, both, I would say, back reference, and also I would say sort of like where we see similar stories in previous decades, because this movie's going on 30 years.
I would definitely go back to The Wraith well before I go back to Teen Wolf or Teen Wolf 2. And I'll be completely honest with you guys, I've never really gotten into Lost Boys as much as other people. I don't know if I was just a little too old for it or if it was just a little too flashy or something, but even when it shows on TV now, it's like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like the Jason Patrick storyline, but I really could do without the Corey's kind of thing going on.
Yeah, I think when I was 9 or 10, I was a big Lost Boys fan. But of all of those, I would definitely go back to The Wraith before any of the others.
It's funny that you talk about how this sort of feels like a teen movie, but not really. And you have to remember this was put out right around the time when John Hughes was starting to really make some big films. I mean, this is 85, 86, so, you've had the first couple of John Hughes films in there. And you know what it also kind of reminds me of in sort of that similar style where you could go, okay, there are obvious quote-unquote teen, we're in high school kind of stuff, is the one that competed with The Lost Boys, which I like, Mike's not a big fan of, is Near Dark. Almost kind of has that same thing where people could go, oh, well, this is supposed to be a teen film. Well, actually, no.
Yeah, it's definitely it has some of those trappings, but it's, I think, like the Wraith, it's really working on another level altogether.
I like that these aren't necessarily high school films either. What you mentioned, Near Dark, that's definitely post-high school. Same thing with this one. It's like, it feels like maybe they graduated just a little bit ago, but we're definitely not worrying about, going to class and what the principal thinks. And I don't think that it's just this is summer vacation kind of thing. It feels more mature than kids worrying about what's happening in high school.
But it's not too far off. I would say that if the characters are 21, that's pushing it.
No, I'm definitely thinking 18, 19, somewhere right around there. Enough time on their hands to do stupid stuff, but not necessarily, having to get up every morning and go to their homeroom or something, which is kind of funny since, bringing up Sherilyn Fenn as Audrey Horne, that she would go on to play a teenager 4 years after this, so she was kind of going back in time a little bit.
It's part of the grand old tradition of casting people in their late 20s as teenagers.
So let's go ahead and take a break and play an interview with the writer and director of The Wraith, Mr. Mike Marvin, after these important messages.
One dark and stormy night in the mid-'80s, Joe Bob Briggs, Harlan Ellison, and the ghost of El Santo pulled a train on Elvira while Siskel and Ebert sobbingly masturbated in the corner. From that union arose the greatest movie critic and luchador that ever lived. But we're not going to talk about him. He's kind of a dick. Instead, we're going to talk about me, El Goro, the stuttering movie fan and host of the Talk Without Rhythm podcast. Every week on Talk Without Rhythm, I discuss 2 to 3 movies tangentially tied together by a theme. I cover action.
And the most complete fighter in the world.
Sci-fi.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Horror.
Oh, no tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering.
And the continuing adventures of James Spader, sexual deviant.
You're not worried that I'm going to fuck you, are you? I'm not interested in that, and I'm waste. Now pull up your skirt.
So check me out at tworpodcast.blogspot.com, drunkenzombie.com, or subscribe on iTunes. Talk Without Rhythm, the only podcast that will not attract the worm. Adios.
Alright, I'm here with Bill Byforce and Mr. Chris to tell you a little bit about Outside the Cinema.
Alright, Reverend Scott, take us to church.
What can we expect to find from a typical show?
2 hours of just random blabber.
Is there anyone's coattails you rode in on to popularity?
I'm the guy that fucking burns the coattails and then pisses on them.
You review all these exploitation, horror, comedy, cult, and often all-around terrible movies. You must have a strong driving force that keeps you going.
Ego!
I don't know if I've heard you say that before.
Yeah, I've been saying that for a while.
Really?
I have been saying that for a while. Also, I'm high on smack.
Well, it's definitely working for you guys. People are coming out in droves to support you on iTunes.
We just the other day got a 1-star review on iTunes.
Well, that is 1 star too many. Let me tell you. The worst fucking piece of shit I've ever heard.
This has been great, guys.
Thanks, Scott. That was good. Oh, he's got you crying over there.
I'm good for the rest of the year.
Nice.
That was too much.
Let me ask you a question. Are you getting enough? I bet you'd love more, right? Well, AdamandEve.com wants to give you more with 10 free gifts. First, you'll get a sexy surprise for her. Second, a specially selected toy for him. And third, a little something we know you'll both enjoy. Plus, you'll get 6 full-length adult movies on DVD. And number 10, free shipping on your entire order. So what do you have to do to get your 10 free gifts? It's not hard. Just go to AdamandEve.com and select any one item. It could be an adventurous new toy, sexy piece of lingerie, or anything you desire. Just enter offer code BOOTH at checkout, and you'll get all 10 free gifts. Go check out AdamandEve.com today. Select one item and get 10 free gifts, including free shipping when you enter offer code BOOTH. That's BOOTH at AdamandEve.com.
This is Adam Spiegelman from the Cult Movie Podcast, Proudly Resents. And you're listening to my favorite movie podcast, The Projection Booth. I know. It's messed up, right?
Christopher Media, the Weedsman Podcast.
Cures rickets, polio, conjunctivitis, AIDS.
Let's just go hog wild.
Be in the car accident, you just use a little bit and you'll be fine.
Yeah, rub it on your car and yourself. It'll fix your car and your bones.
Try this special trick to get out of traffic tickets with Rick Simpson oil.
Rub it on the cop. He'll just go away.
The Weedsman Podcast. Every Friday on iTunes and ChristopherMedia.net. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
So your initial directing experience could have gone a little bit better as far as kind of being dumped into Hamburger and having to just think on the fly so much. When it came to the Wraith, how did that one kind of come together?
Well, the Wraith, I was signed to direct the Wraith well before I did Hamburger, and I was working on it. What happened was when Hamburger came out and it got a lot of negative reviews, although it did really well in certain parts of the world. I mean, it did really well overseas. It did really well in Australia, did really well in Canada. It set records at a couple of movie houses. I mean, it was really baffling. I was set to direct on the Wraith, and what happened on the Wraith was that was my first experience at battling, and not my last, and certainly not the last, where every day was a hard-fought emotional battle to get the movie done. A guy was killed on the movie, and ultimately I was held responsible when in fact I was the last person to be held responsible on that movie. And it was, making the Wraith was a true nightmare experience in filmmaking. There's very, very, very few movies like it that were nightmarish. I've heard from the Butlers that Apocalypse Now was a nightmare for them. I had lunch with them the day they got back from the Philippines. I can tell you that, working with bad human beings and then having a guy killed and when it was completely unnecessary and it was without point, was just really, that taught me a lot. That was a great lesson in, what not to do and who not to do movies with. So that the Wraith has turned out to be another culty movie with fan clubs all over the world and guys building Wraith cars and guys collecting Wraith memorabilia is so strange to me, but then so's hot dogs. So
you kind of went from the frying pan into the fire with that one, it sounds like.
Yeah, I did. I thought that I knew that Hamburger was not going to help my career, so I thought the Wraith would, because I felt that I had all the tools to make a really great car action movie, and what I didn't, and I brought in people that I trusted, and they were not very nice. As it turned out, they were not very nice guys. And when that happened, I found myself on the wrong side of, a lot of different issues on the Wraith. And every day, like I say, every day on the Wraith was an emotional battle, just the worst. And then, of course, in the end, to have a guy killed shooting second unit was just completely unforgivable. That's what happens when you push a crew unnecessarily.
I'm not going to ask you to name names. Was it people, though, behind the camera or in front of the camera?
Behind the camera, and I will name names. It was John Kemeny was the producer, and Jeff Sudson was the production manager, and they were pushing the production. And the day the guy was killed, those scenes weren't even on the call sheets. They created it that day, trying to push the production. The accountant came out and told me why are you pushing this movie? You're under budget. He said, and I found out later it was because, the producer was going to Canada and he had to be in Canada to do another movie. So he didn't give a shit. He was just wanted to get the movie done. He didn't care whether it worked or not. All he cared about was the next movie. I heard on the next movie another guy died on his next movie too.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So the movie kind of came out really good, almost despite all that stuff that was going on.
The movie came out as a, I still have my cringe moments when I watch it, but the movie, a lot of guys were 10, 12, I made it for 14-year-old boys, and a lot of them, it became a cult movie. I mean, I'm always amazed. I get letters and requests all the time, and some guy builds Wraith cars, or he built about 8 of them and selling them for $300,000 a copy. So people took that movie much more seriously than I intended it to be.
I always got a real kind of spaghetti western feel from the film. Was that intentional?
Yes, it was I just basically plagiarized the idea from High Plains Drifter.
I've got one more question about the Wraith for you. The Clint Howard character, Rughead, was he kind of a nod to Eraserhead?
Exactly.
Okay. I always hoped that you were going for that. I just wanted to make sure.
yeah, it was. That's exactly right. And he was. In the first draft of the script, he was the fat kid. We called him the fat kid. He was the fat kid all the way through casting and everything. And then I was watching Eraserhead one day, and I thought, we got to change it. And so I changed it to Rughead, and I kind of copied that and tried to make it fun. I tried to make the gang as tweaky as possible.
Was it any surprise, speaking of tweaky, was it any surprise to you when Charlie Sheen kind of had his moment a few years ago?
No, Charlie melted down on the set of The Wraith. It was a major meltdown. Behind the scenes was as follows. We were the second to the last day of principal, and he showed up on set. It was a Monday. He showed up on set from 3 days in Las Vegas. He was incoherent. And when I say incoherent, I mean he could not speak a single line. And I even tried doing it word for word, like 3 words. See if you can get 3 words up. He couldn't speak. He was so blasted. And I walked away. At one point, I walked away from him, and he fell over like a tree. I thought he had been killed. And so we closed production that day. And Kemeny, who was to me, just a monster anyway, called the completion bond company and told the completion bond company that he could not guarantee delivery of the movie because of Charlie. So what happened is I reshot the scene with him and sent him home. And before I sent him home, I sat him down in the trailer and I said, Charlie, listen to me. I said, listen, buddy, you can't do this again. If you do this again, you will kill your career. You can't walk on set and so drunk, so wasted, you can't even speak your own name. And he was really upset, really humiliated with himself. And I said, just can't do it. You're going to be a big star. You could be a big star. Little did I know he had been cast already in Platoon. Well, it was 2 days later that the producer of Platoon, what's his name? Arnold. Damn, if I can remember his name.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to help you out on that one offhand.
Yeah. Anyway, he and his wife showed up, and they wanted to know what the story was on Arnold Kopelson.
Kopelson, yeah.
Arnold and Ann Kopelson showed up ready. They wanted to fire Charlie off of Platoon. They were there to fire him, and they asked me point blank, and I actually looked him in the eye, and I've always been I've always felt strange about this, but I lied. And I said, no, Charlie behaved himself. He didn't do any of the things that you've heard. And the reason why I did that is because Kemeny did not need to call the completion bond company and report Charlie. It wasn't a catastrophe. It was just a disaster. And, you know, Charlie learned a good lesson. But Kemeny hated Charlie, and so he was going to make Charlie pay. So Kopelson flies in with his wife, who was this battle axe woman, and they were there to kill Charlie's career for sure. They didn't want to have any problems with Charlie in the Philippines. And so, you know, I just point blank told them, no, Charlie behaved himself on the whole movie. And then I talked to Charlie again, and I said, dude, you cannot do this shit. And he didn't. He never did that again on a movie that I know about. That's sort of an inside story. I told Charlie about this, by the way. I said, dude, I covered for you. Charlie and I we communicate through mutual friends. Nick Cassavetes is my closest friend, and he's very close with Charlie.
He was fantastic in The Wraith. That was the first time I think I saw him in anything.
Yeah, really good.
You kind of won the lottery, really, when I think about actors that have become a little unstable, because you had Randy Quaid in that one, too.
Yeah, Randy was great. Something happened. Something got in Randy's way. His brother and I had a conversation about this, and, you know, I guess it was the girlfriend. Everybody says it was the girlfriend. You know, she Svengali'd Randy, and I don't know if that's true, but Randy and I played golf a lot, and then suddenly he wasn't around anymore.
Yet another SNL caster, too, because I think he and Lovitz were on the same seasons of SNL to start with.
Yeah, they were. And Lovitz and I talked a few times after that, and Randy and everything. But, you know, in the movie business, it's kind of like working in a carnival. You know, you're thrown together with people for, you know, weeks on end, and then you never see them again. You know, it's really depressing, and it's one of the downsides about the movie business. People outside the movie business really don't know about. That's why most of my friends are not in the movie business, because I know they'll be there when I come home.
That's a good point. Yeah, being from Detroit, I kind of have to ask you about the car. How did that deal kind of come together? That was it was a Dodge, right?
Yeah, I went to Dodge. I flew to Detroit, and I met with those guys, and they were solidly behind the movie, but they did not want me to make The Road Warrior. And I was determined to make The Road Warrior, but to do it in a creative way. I always liked The Road Warrior, the way the car stuff was shot, and I wanted to do something very similar to it. I never really accomplished it because of all the problems I had with Kemeny and Sutson. But the Detroit guys were great, man. They sent me brand new cars, and I blew those cars up. They were brand new. That car that goes launched off the cliff was brand new. I don't even think we took the engine out of that thing. We cabled it off the cliff and just blew it to pieces.
Oh, my God. And those things weren't cheap either.
No, they were, at that time in 85, 86, they were like $25,000.
Oh.
Each.
That must have been a significant part of your budget.
Well, no, Dodge gave them to us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Dodge gave them to us.
What was the reaction to the Wraith when that one came out?
The Wraith got good reviews everywhere in the United States except for Los Angeles. A guy named Michael Wilmington. Here's another moment for you. After everything we went to get that movie made and all the pain and suffering and horror, Michael Wilmington, and it was headlines. It was a turbocharged cartoon, ... for idiots. And it was in the LA Times calendar section, reviewed big time. And I remember sitting at the table, and my wife saw it, and she broke down and started crying. And I I will never be able to forgive this guy for doing that, because it was totally unnecessary, and it was the only review like that. There were lukewarm reviews, but there weren't pans, and Janet Maslin in the New York Times gave it kind of a good review. And all things considered, it got a fairly decent reviews, and got some bad reviews, but it was,
Some of the more recent stuff, just a few, and then we'll let you go.
Sure.
Recently you produced, I don't know if it was both parts, but definitely the first part of the Atlas Shrugged, right?
I did.
And
I produced.
Was wondering how that came together.
That's another interesting story. I was, a guy came to, I was just left Amark Entertainment after 5 or 6 years of running Amark, and a guy showed up. He was about to lose the rights after 20 years for a guy named John Aguilera. Going to lose the rights to Atlas Shrugged, and so he commissioned a script that had to be written in like 20 days. Seriously. So I sat down and wrote the script based on the first 300 pages of the book. And he ended up financing the movie. He had a June 15th. He had to have it in production. They threw it into production. One of my good friends ended up stepping in, and he had 9 days to prep the movie, cast and prep the movie, and we did it. And I produced the movie, and I directed all the second unit in the movie, and Paul Johansson directed all the principal. And, what worked in the end, the movie worked. And it was the #1 limited release in the country that weekend, and it did okay. I mean, it made about, I don't know, $5 or $6 million. It only cost $2 or $3 million. It cost about $4 million to produce, but it did quite well. And they never picked up the phone to have me do part 2 or part 3 or Paul, or they didn't even use the same cast. They were so strangely arrogant. They just went and they did brand new cast, brand new crew. Everything was brand new. It's like, why would you guys do that? But that's what they did. And then the third one they did was another brand new. So there was no continuity of characters whatsoever. But the first one was the successful one, and I'm kind of proud that we got it off the ground with no, having done it before, I knew what to expect. After Hamburger, I knew what to expect, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely.
No prep. You're going on sheer experience. And by the time I got to Atlas Shrugged Part 1, I had 40 years of experience making movies, and I knew what to do.
I remember when it was released, it sort of went out like to follow the model of maybe something like Passion of the Christ, the idea of reaching into these groups and getting them to show up and things like that. I mean, that was sort of an interesting way to distribute the film. That's correct. And Rocky Mountain took it out that way, and they invited people, and they did fan clubs, and that's probably the wrong word, but they had a lot of Atlas Shrugged people who were fans of the book, and they reached out and got those people in the theaters. And it was fun. I can tell you it was fun to experience that, because people just loved that book and they loved the movie. Even though the movie was flawed, they loved it. And, I got about 90% of what I wanted when I took over the movie from the creative point of view. From the creative, I had about 90% of what I wanted done on it. And it was only after the producer stepped in and meddled with the movie, but he didn't have time to ruin it. He only had time to goof it up a little. And so the movie turned out fairly okay. That book by Ayn Rand is kind of a doorstop. I mean, that must have been a challenge to try and make a script out of it.
Yeah, in 20 days. Can you imagine? I was working 12 hours a day on the thing, and I was exhausted in the end. And then Paul did the movie, and then about, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks into the post, Paul brought me in, and we started creating how we would approach second unit. And then Paul left to do something else, and I ended up taking over the whole entire picture to finish the picture. Totally took it over.
So what are you working on now? What are some of the things that you're putting together?
Well, I have Hot Dog 2 for the winter of 2016, or should I say Hot Dog the remake, or how about just Hot Dog the movie, like Fast and Furious, you know? Nobody will care. It's been too long. And then I'm writing a script called Carousel. Cassavetes and I are writing a script called Carousel for a New York producer, which is about, it's a story of, love and loyalty between two brothers who come out of different worlds and are sort of forced together to deal with craziness of Wall Street and short sellers on Wall Street. You know what short sellers are, like guys who sell like Herbalife, go after Herbalife. And so that's what I'm working on now.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this has been great.
Fun talking about it.
Thanks again to Mike Marvin for joining us. You can hear the rest of our interview with him on our Hamburger the Motion Picture episode that was just done recently. So, gentlemen, as we alluded to, it does borrow from other places, the Wraith. So let's talk about some of those things that we see, like what are some similar stories and ideas backward, and then maybe even going forward.
Well, I definitely saw a lot of High Plains Drifter when I watched this the first time. I think both of you guys have rewatched that one recently, and so hopefully you think that I'm fair in my judgment of that. But this whole idea of the stranger coming out of the desert, coming into town, and this whole idea of this avenging spirit. And what I liked about High Plains Drifter, we have, again, you probably should see a lot of scars on Clint Eastwood's back because his character may or may not be the ghost of this former marshal that was in town who got whipped to death by these three baddies who were there. And the whole town, except for two people, kowtowed to these baddies. And I like that whole idea that everybody is going to get punished except for the two people that kind of tried to stand up for him. One of them was powerless because of his size, and the other one was powerless because she was being held back against her will. But that whole idea of the spirit coming into town, taking over, and putting things right that were wrong.
Plus, Clint has a pretty sweet ride in this film.
Hell yeah, he does.
I think the similarities are really spot on, especially the kind of flashbacks are almost direct references to High Plains Drifter, the shot of the headstone. And yeah, I just rewatched it last week, and then going back to the Wraith, I was so glad when Chuck Sheen's first order of business was not to just rape a townsperson.
Yeah, I took that in my notes. I go, Clint, little rapey here, son. Yeah.
Yikes.
So many great actors in High Plains Drifter. I mean, everybody is just so good in this, and there's so many of the townspeople are just like, oh my gosh, this person is great. And this person is great too. And again, big fan of Mork and Mindy. So seeing, oh god, why am I blanking on the guy's name?
The one in there that I liked, and I was like, I've seen him in other things, but I can't remember who he is because he looked familiar, was the guy who played Mordecai. You were talking about the little person and how Eastwood's character, who doesn't say his name, it's just, I think he's listed in the credits as the stranger, makes him not only the sheriff but the mayor of the town. And everybody's like, all right, well, this guy's off his rocker. What the hell is he doing?
I was very glad to see Exodore show up. The crazy monk, Richard Donner. He was always a treat. And then the guys who played the villains in this, of course, Jeffrey Lewis, who had worked with Clint Eastwood on a ton of things. He's amazing. And then Anthony James, who just put out a book recently called Acting My Face, and I'm hoping to dive into that pretty soon and have an interview with him on the show. But yeah, some great great faces, some great characters. And yeah, Billy Curtis was amazing in this, and I was so glad that he had such a juicy role. And really, I mean, he might as well be second billed in this film because it's really his and Clint Eastwood's film, which is just an amazing thing that, you know, they would cast a little person in a role this big at the time and really treat him with a lot of respect, which I liked.
Yeah, you get the feeling that the Eastwood character is really in with the underdog, and having this guy who's kind of been pushed around by people in town because of his stature, and then he comes in and sort of levels him up to everyone else is kind of an interesting thing.
Of course, I kept thinking of Blazing Saddles a lot because of John Hillerman being in here as the bootmaker, and he shows up as one of the Johnsons in Blazing Saddles as well.
For some reason, the guy, as you were saying, who Billy Curtis, who was playing Mordecai, I just had this flashback to like Putney Swope and the guy who plays the president, which I know is not. I don't think he's the same guy, but I was just like, oh, they got the guy who played the president.
Oh, that guy had that. Didn't he have like a German accent?
Yeah, it was him and the woman, which I think Bob Downey told us was his sister, not his wife. He's like making out with her in the film.
Oh, the rape might be a little much for today's audience, but I don't know. That whole idea of him raping this woman, I mean, really, when you get down to it, everybody in the town kind of gets what they deserve, and maybe that's kind of what she deserved, but that whole thing where she comes back in and tries to shooting him point-blank range, and he is still alive afterwards, which really should be one of the big things where you're like, there's something going on with this character that is a little supernatural here. And that whole line about, I'm amazed that it took her so long to come back in and do this. So I really appreciated some of the dialogue in this too. And it was, I think this was right. Eastwood had already directed Play Misty for me, but this was, I want to say, his first Western that he had done post Leone and Siegel, or the first Western that he directed himself in.
Yeah, and for me, when I was watching it after recently we had done Once Upon a Time in the West, and of course, I've seen all the Dollars trilogy films and all of that. You see a lot of that Leone style in here. I mean, a lot of just looks. Like, he doesn't say much, he just gives people looks. And I was just like, that's the Eastwood, that's the Western we know out of him, because that seems to be where it comes from, at least in my mind.
Yeah, and that final little bit of going back to the Wraith, that whole thing of, who are you, bro? Who are you, bro? Like, I don't remember the Billy character using the word bro that much, but he sure was towards the end of the film. And then, Charlie Sheen's like, you just said who I am. And that whole thing of Mordecai, you never said who you are or whatever. And he's like, oh, you know my name. And then move over to the headstone that he's carving, and it's like, oh, that's nice. Good stuff. Way to end a movie there, Clint.
Yeah, and he just goes off into the desert, into the mirage, which I think should have been the better ending for the Wraith, but that's me.
Yeah, should have just gone off and, like I said, become Star Stuff again or something, or become those weird animated blobs that were at the beginning of the Wraith that would have kind of helped thing. But maybe it's that whole, you got to write off with the girl thing, but it didn't work for me.
You guys have anything else on High Plains Drifter?
I do not.
I don't either.
For me, when I was watching The Wraith, I was thinking of older stories or other things that I remember in terms of like vengeful spirits, and like the idea of the Headless Horseman, maybe like Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which was then converted by Warren Zevon into Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner. Great song. And then also was thinking about Ghost Rider, the Marvel comic, started in the late 60s, early 70s, I think. And that's obviously been turned into a film at this point. But the idea of these, supernatural forces that come back and seek vengeance.
Yeah, I can really see that, especially with the Headless Horseman character. And I didn't read Ghost Rider. I'm only familiar with the movie, so I'm not sure how the character changed between the comics and the movies. Was he kind of a wronged person?
Yeah, the character kind of sold his soul to the devil, basically. The character himself wasn't wronged, but he sold his soul to the devil, and so would become the spirit of vengeance to right wrongs or whatever, but the character himself wasn't like in the Wraith or High Plains Drifter where he himself was wronged. That's a really good point that you make about it being like some of these older characters. I think as much as I like the idea of this kind of duality of Jake and the Wraith being the same person, I do think having Charlie Sheen play like normal guy, romantic leading man, and also being the Wraith, I think steps on a little bit of the kind of vengeance angle. Like I part of me wonders if I wouldn't almost rather the Wraith just be the Wraith and be this spirit of vengeance that shows up and let it be kind of dark. You know, one thing about High Plains Drifter is like it's really willing to be dark and nasty. And I think the Wraith sometimes undercuts some of that with the romance angle.
Which is the thing we've talked about before as characters as force of nature and not necessarily human or characters that are relatable in some way. And I can't remember what episode we talked about that idea on, but the one that I always come back to is the first Halloween film, and John Carpenter's use of the Michael Myers character is just sort of this thing. He's this force. That's it. There's really nothing there. It's just sort of this force, and you have to buy into that. And for some people, that's kind of a leap, but I think he could have done a similar thing with the Wraith, where it's like he doesn't talk, he doesn't really interact with anyone. He's just there to meter out the vengeance.
But I want to know how Michael Myers became who he is. I want to know what his mom and dad were like.
Well, then watch the 15th film in the series. I don't know which one where they get into that.
One of the weird things about the movie, especially on this revisit, it almost feels like there might be too many characters to the point where you don't know whose story is being told. Because, Mike, like you said, Charlie Sheen isn't in the movie that much, so it's not really his story. It could be Sherilyn Fenn's, but she's really just there as kind of a prop. It could be Billy's story, but it's not really. It's not Randy Quaid investigating this case. It's not even Nick Cassavetes. It's like the movie never quite decides whose eyes to tell the story through. And I think you could almost do it through any of these characters' eyes, but instead the movie kind of tries to give equal time to everyone. And I think that lack of a point of view makes it a little bit messier than it needs to be.
Well, I don't necessarily think that you have a point of view in High Plains Drifter, but to your point, we hang out with Clint Eastwood the whole time, and it's like the camera's kind of over his shoulder almost through the entire thing. And then the scenes where he's not in it, and he's in 80-90% of the film, and those other scenes are just things that are going to play into his story as we go along. So you're right, as far as we don't necessarily focus on any one person in the Wraith as much as we need to. I mean, really, it should be like the Billy and Sherilyn Fenn story, and it's just like, come on, guys, you really should have done that a little bit more. And yeah, to your point, Rob, I think that whole idea of Charlie Sheen, nice guy coming in, romancing the girl, kind of. I mean, they do have the sex scene and everything, and it's just like, yeah, I would have much rather him have been as standoffish as Clint Eastwood. I mean, Clint Eastwood is just, he's there for one purpose, and he is just manipulating all of these pieces on the chessboard, and he doesn't spend time with one character over others. I mean, I talked about how much Mordecai is in the film, but it's not like he's palling around with Mordecai. They're playing cards and drinking beers or something. He's again using Mordecai in a way to pit these people in the town against each other and just create this hell on earth that needs to be there for his vengeance. But yeah, it's the Wraith is a little too unfocused when it comes to that. Yeah. The one movie that I kept coming back to was The Crow, and I rewatched that one again today because I had remembered, of course I remember T-Bird, who's played by David Patrick Kelly, and Skank, who's played by Angel David. And then as I was thinking about it, I was like, oh yeah, Skank, and then there's also Fun Boy, so there's not Gutterboy, unfortunately, but kind of having almost a one-to-one here with some of these guys in the gang. And again, another Spirit of Vengeance coming back, and I think this one too is very well done. And of course, another tie from the Wraith to the Crow is this whole idea that somebody died during the production, and in this case it was our leading man Brandon Lee who died during the production of the Crow. And I know it's a horrible thing to say, but I will say that I think some of the challenges that were presented because of Brandon Lee dying actually made The Crow a better film in the way that they had to present a lot of things, as flashbacks, and the way that they did a lot of things without showing his face, and just the way that they kind of worked around the problem of him not being there anymore. I mean, I want to say they shot maybe 80% of the film and then had the rest of this where they had to kind of work around not having the leading man anymore. This kind of falls to the Billy and Sherilyn Fenn characters, and really this is the story of Sarah, who's the little girl played by Rochelle Davis, and Sergeant Albrecht, who's played by Ernie Hudson. It's their story, their friendship, and then Eric Draven, the Crow, is kind of subsequential to the film. Amazing performance. I forgot how much I love Brandon Lee in this. And while I was watching it, I just kept thinking to myself, I wonder if Heath Ledger watched this film in preparation for being the Joker, because the two characters really shared a lot of qualities to me.
Yeah, I can get that. The thing with sort of the spirit, both of them were killed. So the idea is that both him and his fiancée were both killed, and then he comes back to avenge their deaths. The thing is that it's been a while since I've read the book, but I know that the graphic novel, the comics, were created out of James O'Barr dealing with his own grief. His girlfriend was killed, I believe, in a horrible traffic accident, and they were to be married and all that, and the concept of the Crow came out of that. I think she was killed by a drunk driver. So he channeled all that in there, but I don't remember how close the graphic novel is to the film. I don't believe it's that close. I think that a lot was created out of the ideas that were in the book, but it was a bit different.
I think The Crow also does a nice job of kind of bridging the two in terms of the character is very much sort of the mystical, vengeful spirit of High Plains Drifter, but I think it pulls in kind of the romantic element in a way that's much more successful than the Wraith.
Yeah, it almost would have been better if Sherilyn Fenn, her character, had been killed as well, just because you have this romance that goes beyond the grave kind of thing, and that she's not necessarily a character except in flashbacks in The Crow. The whole idea of his girlfriend being murdered by these guys, and he's getting vengeance more for her than he is for himself. I kind of like that a little bit more. It made sense when it came to getting vengeance for yourself when it came to High Plains Drifter, but again, we're sticking with the Clint Eastwood character and everything. But with this one, I like that Brandon Lee, and the other thing that I really like, just to throw this in here, there's no doubt in the world that there is supernatural stuff going on in here, but yet they're not hitting you over the head with it. So it's not like, oh, Jesus, supernatural, this is going to be spooky or whatever. It felt very natural to the plot that this spirit of vengeance is coming back a year later, and here he is, and he's going to take revenge on all these guys. They worked with the supernatural very well, and it wasn't this kind of like that weird reveal that we were talking about later on. It wasn't like, oh, you're Eric Draven this whole time. Wow, we never figured that out. Like he wipes off the makeup at the end or something. Oh, wow, geez, you could have fooled me. I thought you were just some dude who was wearing my makeup this whole time. So I was glad that they embraced the supernatural with this one. And it just kind of like High Plains Drifter, they embraced the supernatural with that one as well.
The Crow also stands as kind of a time capsule of its period for the way that it uses the popular music of the era in the same way that the Wraith does for 1986.
Totally. Though I have to say, I still get chills when he's running across the rooftops and Nine Inch Nails cover of the Joy Division song is going. That scene, seeing that in the theater all those years ago and then even seeing it again today, I was just like, yeah, this really, really works.
And it's another Detroit film, not shot in Detroit. So there you go.
Yeah, when they're going through the city and there's like elevated trains and stuff. I'm like, yeah, let's set the people mover.
Yeah, that's not Detroit. The one thing that's kind of being a Detroit nerd, when they go to the club and there's the scene of like they're going down the stairs or something, there's like various band photos and stuff like that, because he was in a band. That was part of the thing in The Crow. One of the band photos that's next to him was an actual Detroit band of that era, which was a promo photo shot of Big Chief.
Very cool. Nothing wrong with being a Detroit nerd, Rob.
Oh, you know, we do what we can.
All right, we're going to take a break and play a preview for next week's show.
Every year, hundreds of young people travel the country and disappear. God help those who get caught in the tourist trap. Tourist trap, where beautiful young people looking for excitement are tricked, terrorized, trapped. Tourist trap. Shock you can see. Terror you can feel. Heart-stopping suspense that makes this the nightmare that never ends. Something crazy's going on at the tourist trap.
That's right. We're back next week with a look at the 70s horror film Tourist Trap. We'll be joined by the head honcho of all things Geek Juice Media, Alex Jowski, as we talk about the film. Now, before we go, I want to thank this week's special guest host, Patrick Bromley, for joining us. Now, we had you on our Bad Lieutenants episode last year, and since then, what have you been up to, sir?
I was murdered and came back to life as a vengeful podcast host.
Ooh, the big reveal at the end of the show.
That's exactly. I waited till the end, guys.
See, but we already knew you were you. So were you? And like what happened? Never mind.
Can I ride on your motorcycle?
Anytime.
Excellent.
No, I still host a podcast and run a site called F This Movie over at fthismovie.net, posting new content every day and just plugging away, seeing a lot of movies.
What kind of stuff are you covering lately, sir?
Everything from new releases to a regular column I do on full moon movies. So I'm actually really excited to hear your Tourist Trap episode.
As well you should, because we do talk to Charlie Band a little bit for that one.
Awesome.
All right, well, thanks again, Patrick, and thanks to everybody for listening to the show. If you want to return the favor or return from the dead to seek your vengeance, head on over to our iTunes page and give us a review. Won't cost nothing. Now let's hit the road.
Headlights coming, Jamie's back from the other side. Ghost Rider, motorcycle hero. Baby, he's a looking so cute. Sneaking round in a blue jumpsuit. Ghost Rider, motorcycle hero. Baby, he's a blazing away. Like the stars in the universe. Ghost Rider, motorcycle hero. Baby, he's a screaming the truth. America's killing its youth. Baby, he's screaming away. America's killing its youth. America's killing its youth. Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider.
Wait a minute! Come back! Come back, bro!
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.